have mental health needs or neurodiversity, every single day is a choice to live your best life. And you have to put in that effort or it's going to fall apart. And I mean literally every single day. I realize this throughout the day because I have to practice resiliency, I have to practice self-reliance, all of these things.
And welcome everyone to another episode of Humanity 2.0 podcast. We're so glad that you're here. We are interviewing humans about humanity. Today's guest is Thomas R. Wilson. And Thomas, I've prepared a little sweet paragraph about you for everyone to hear. So that being said, Thomas has lived with the experience of mental health, bullies, and found a way through poetry, novels, and music. And now he utilizes D&D and also builds community and acts as a group facilitator, educator, and also a mentor to help others to connect in community, in a very deep and cohesive manner, which is amazing. Thomas, you build bridges for those who need help crossing that path and then also catering for it to be redefined for their needs. My friend, personally, I believe that you're a unicorn and you are so valuable. You are worthy of every single success that you have coming to you. And you, sir, are a human testament to resilience. And that is my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm going to be honest, I'm doing a lot better after all those kudos.
Right? Like, can I just make that a business and just go to whoever needs it? Because I can do that. And it's all from the heart, truly, honestly. I mean, I read your background and I was just so inspired by you transforming your personal experience into something that is so beneficial and healing for other people, but also I'm sure for yourself through your work. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, I'd love to say yes to that fully, but I think the big mission of my work is for me not to be the like center focus. I know that's kind of contradictory to be on a podcast with my name on it and talking about what I do. But the big thing for me is really when other people claim their power and claim their voice and begin to do the work. Because I will talk a lot about myself today, but it's, I think there's a difference between being prideful and arrogant, and I work really hard not to become arrogant.
Yeah. Well, I would say you're doing a good job. And I understand what you mean. I mean, yes, you do have to speak about yourself, but in retrospect, you are speaking about what you've done for other people to help lift them and to just support them. So really, everyone is hearing the work and the end result as opposed to focusing on, Thomas R. Wilson. So I think you're fine. I think you're 100% fine.
Thank you.
When you think of humanity, what is the first image or story or feeling or even color maybe or a smell? What is the first thing that comes to mind for you when you hear the word humanity?
So I'm going to be honest, stories. I talk a lot about this, but I really believe storytelling is the great human art form. I know a lot of people say it's like dance or painting or many other art forms, and I don't want to discredit those because those are all so powerful and they create a pathway for people to express themselves. And I love communication. I'm a big believer in effective communication, not just being like conveying points, but actually expressing our humanity and what we need and how we need it. But when I think of that, I think of stories and I call it the great art form because it's literally part of every other art form. Paintings are storytelling in their own right. Dance is its own form of storytelling. Literally telling stories is storytelling. How we check in with people at the end of the day, it's storytelling. And I think a lot of us miss that. We miss the idea that when it comes to any art or really most things, humanity is intrinsically tied to stories. We've been doing this for like longer than most people think human beings have been around. We have cave paintings. I'm sure we had something before then. And I bring up cave paintings a lot because especially as I've talked about this more and more, I really believe that is, one, a testament to the endurance of storytelling, but it also tells us a lot about the beauty of humanity's connection to stories. Because even back in those times, we had a desire and we had a creative craving to express ourselves. And I think it's so confoundingly beautiful that cave paintings are still around and they've been preserved because they are humanity's stories, and all of human history is really stories at its core.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is very well said, and I 100%, 1000% agree. I storytelling is my whole life, and it's, part of our profession now, but just not even understanding the gravity of having grown up and just told stories forever. I remember writing stories when I was a little kid and publishing, not publishing them, but I mean writing them and then putting them out in paper format, and my teacher would make this little library for me. It was so cute. But just telling stories and then growing up and writing those stories and then growing up and speaking those stories and just massive stories. And then I think of what you said about the caveman, and I love that so much. But what I love most is that it makes me think of the fact that when and if there was a period where they weren't speaking at all, right? Maybe they were depicting that in a visual form because they were not able to speak or exactly capture what it was they were trying to say. So, in a way, if you're unable to speak something into existence or to speak a thought or idea, the fact that it can come out in a whole other art form visually, that's just unbelievably beautiful, right? You think of composers who could no longer hear or artists that could no longer see, and just the way that their art transforms. But the idea of thinking about if you cannot talk, but you can put it into a visual medium of some kind, that's just extraordinary, I think.
I completely agree. And I think the thing that is my great frustration about nowadays is, and I think it's changing rapidly because we see this changing so quickly, is just the idea that creativity is seen as immature. And I think the thing that it frustrates me about that is, and it is radically changing because there's social media that's changing that on a great scale. There's new people turning to writing and reading. Despite all of the frustration, AI is helping that tremendously for people who have not had typical access to tools that would help them do that. And what I mean by that is, like, particularly like you said, those of us who can't communicate a certain way or may not have hands to write or really may not even have a voice that they can share because they live within the nonverbal community. I really see all of this transition to creativity. And I think the frustration that I have is shifting because we're also acknowledging things like play can be creativity and can teach us how to tell our story or how to communicate. I literally did an event earlier today, and I sat down with a kiddo who's on the spectrum, I'm sure, and brilliant, immensely talented 4-year-old who told me this beautiful story about the cartoon Bluey and how he gets to watch it on his tablet. And I got to talk to his mom. I was like, your kiddo is brilliant. And she just looked at me like with so much warmth. And then she told me about how he constantly hacks into technology at 4 years old because he's so smart and he knows what to do. And I think, like, this is the heart of creativity, is it's not just expression, but it's also beneficial, and it teaches us. And I don't know the exact name of the study, but I was talking to someone the other day and they were highlighting that when it comes to play, we can learn things like in 10 attempts through play versus, starting to sit down with a piece of paper and reread it and reread it. And I think just the idea and the philosophy that we have in this modern age of creativity towards really anything can be a successful venture, I think is also another beautiful testament to the resiliency of human beings and also just to our desire to create. It's this kind of wild, confounding thing. And I think the other part of that that's also beautiful is there's more and more people saying, well, when they're told they can't or they won't, or it's never going to be a career, they go, watch me. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this. I'm going to make it a career. And it's amazing to watch.
On the other end, for those that just listen and they don't pursue it, the fact that they can still, even in their latter years, in their later years, they can still circle back and go to it and begin, right? That's beautiful, I think. And you are so right that it is innate to create. It rhymes. So I love that. That's wonderful. Earlier you mentioned AI. I was talking to somebody about AI today, and it's funny because when you speak to somebody about AI, it's either going to go one of two ways. Either, don't like it, they're coming for us, or else it's like, oh, extremely helpful, love it. And so two different conversations on it, but one of them was talking about how it takes humans in order to interact with AI and to help it develop its strengths and its filters and to mirror and echo humanity. And so I was like, yeah, that's a very good point, that it's not exactly just about what it does on its own, but it takes humanity to affect and to input data into AI to produce. So it's just interesting that it requires us just as much as we require AI. And then the other conversation was a business narrative podcast that was doing a pre-interview. And we were talking about how with AI, they are working on a product, or they were working on a product that was music-based. And with this music-based product, you could take sounds, you could take familiar tones, and the AI will help to create whatever you want, whether it's a single track, whether it's separation of tracks. And I told them, I was like, well, what if you use that to compose? And then you have different composers that would have never existed because they didn't have the talent or they didn't have the background in order to put that, but they know what they like and they could compose music for film or just music for musicians. And I was like, how cool would that be? So funny similarities on this conversation. I wanted to ask about your humanity now. So in regards to your personal humanity experience, it's been said that hardship teaches empathy and that once you've been broken, you see the world completely differently. The question is, what's a hardship that comes to mind for you? And if you can explain how that broke you, how empathy found you, and then how it changed your view on humanity after that.
Yeah, I would be happy to. So I think the big thing for me, and I talk about this a lot on podcasts as well, was the reality of, I mean, I serve as an educator for an organization, but I'm always very vocal about my frustrations around the school system, and the mentality towards those like me, those a lot of us, and this still happens to a real regular basis. But when I was a kid, I was taught. I was like. Speaking of that 4-year-old who's very intelligent, I was told at a very young age I was highly intelligent. I was someone who was considered a genius. I was told I had at 6 years old, I had the IQ of a 40-year-old, all this stuff. And I'll try to put a couple different spins on it that I don't normally do. But what I realized is, as a young kid, you're often treated by how easy you are to work with, by how easy it is to educate you, and by how easy it is for you to get angry or upset or really to be valuable for those who are trying to educate you. And I think, and I say you because I know there's many people probably listening to this who can acknowledge this to a degree. And so when I was in school, after I had a significant loss, I realized that my value was still very much there, but to my educators, to the schools, because my neurodiversity and my mental health started kicking in their mindset, I was not valuable. And that was my experience for a long time. And I spent a lot of my life, by the time I was in middle school, being told I was going to end up in jail, that I was a monster, that I was too hard to work with, that people didn't want to talk to me. I was locked in rooms, all kinds of horrible stuff in the school systems. I do want to emphasize not like a closet, but like rooms that were supposed to be sensory rooms that were very much not sensory rooms. I got broken by that because my mindset still to this day, because of experiences I had from when I was like in 5th grade or before to when I went to college. A lot of the time I was disruptive. I was angry. I wasn't a good person. My teachers did not support peers interacting with me. When there were issues, I was told that I was just being ridiculous and like when other people were bullying me and I was causing the problem. And when you're a kid and like 90% of the adults in your life that are supposed to support you in the school system tell you that you are all of these things, it creates a very lasting and significant self-hatred. And what I did learn, though, through that was how we have to treat people and how we have to treat them at a very young age and how we can actually help people rebuild that mindset to themselves. And so I was craving empathy. I was craving support. And I'm not here to say that I was easy. Like I was no angel. I made things definitely hard on programs. It was very difficult to work with. But I spent a lot of my life with this very deep self-hatred. And that was emphasized many times by teachers, by educators, program leaders. And as you grow up with that, there's, like you said, a couple different ways you can look at it. You can move past it, or you can kind of let it settle in. I spent a lot of my life letting that settle in. But when I opened my business and I opened my work, I was again at a point where I was extremely depressed. As I tell people all the time, when you have mental health needs or neurodiversity, every single day is a choice to live your best life. And you have to put in that effort or it's going to fall apart. And I mean, literally every single day. I realize this throughout the day because I have to practice resiliency. I have to practice self-reliance, all of these things. Some of them are buzzwords. I don't mean to use them in that way, though, because it's that. And I went through that as a kid. I really struggled with that. I tried to continue. It was a lot of pain. But when I opened my business, one of the first thoughts I had was, I don't want to be that kind of person. I don't want to be the person who tells people they're less than. I don't want to focus on their weaknesses. I want to focus on their strengths. I want to be the person that I needed and I wanted to have in my life at that time. And I had some really great familial supports, but there's a lot of struggles when you have those issues going on. And I don't think it's wrong to say that one family member should be that support all the time, right? We should have a vast network, or at least a network of people who can provide support. And so carrying all of these experiences, carrying this pain, this hatred, all of these things, I worked in a framework into my work of, we don't tell kids horrible things. We don't yell at them. We don't belittle them. We focus on what they can do, how they learn, how they develop, how they think. And what I learned throughout that was, yes, a very deep love of empathy, of a strength-based mindset. And I also, because of that brokenness, was able to create a pathway that has now worked for hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of people. I've been able to help educate businesses. I've been able to run programs. And I always like to say, I don't wish any of that pain on someone, but I do value those experiences because they have allowed me to come out of everything I've been through a kinder, gentler, more loving, and patient human being. And those are things that everybody needs to be met with at some point or another.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I really value your sincerity and your transparency. So thank you. I have been kind of taking notes because I don't want to forget anything. I'm a parakeet. So let me just dive backward for you or with you. So the first thing is that I had no idea, and my mind is just kind of blown right now, that teachers teach based on how you are and how you react and how you perceive and learn. I had no idea. I mean, that's very interesting to consider that is a bearing on how they teach you. I would never, well, no one would even know unless you were a teacher, but that is really interesting. And then also, I feel like when you experience mental health issues, or I don't even want to call it issues, but just mental health experiences, right? Or neurodivergence, anything having to do with, I guess, the experience of living in a different way than most, right? I feel like it creates a sensitivity to others that are having to experience that as well. And when they're younger or even your age or older, you just automatically identify with them and you feel for them. And so you have this sensitivity and you just want to help them and make sure that they, like you said, make sure that they don't feel or go through what you went through. So I completely understand that. As someone having survived my own mental health sagas, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And then I also think about the fact that there are people that'll never understand what it's like. Every day is a choice. Sometimes it's harder than others. Sometimes it's not as hard because you realize that you just lived through something, or you just successfully completed a Tuesday and you are just so darn proud that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is a cakewalk. And then come Saturday, Sunday, you might be under the covers and you're just not wanting to come out. So it varies for everyone. The intensity varies. The experiences vary. But I think that it would be really great if people that don't have to experience these particular moments, that they would have sympathy and empathy, or I don't know, maybe sympathy more so, but they would just give space, right? For you to be yourself, but also to allow the opportunity for them not to judge you immediately and to embrace whatever it is that makes you who you are. And so I want to say over 20 years ago, I started working on a book. And what it was a compilation of stories. So contributing authors would be able to write their experiences with mental health. And because it's a first person story, you really get to understand what's going on in their mind and their heart, right? Excuse me, I'm sorry. My alarm, I had no idea why it's going off. But you would get to write your story, through your own voice. And then finally, people who don't have these experiences could read and understand what it is like for you, having lived through that. And it would be a game changer, because you have self-help books, and I always name Prozac Nation because it annoys me, that book. But I just feel like there's stuff that we don't get to talk about because either it's considered taboo or people just don't, they're not ready to hear that. But really, these conversations need to be had, especially now. Mental health is such a big deal now, but there's still so much to uncover that we don't talk about. So for people to be able to share their personal stories and then have other people read them and then say, oh, I get it now, I understand now, that would make a huge difference. And so I just started working on it again this year. I wrote I guess what you would call a proposal for it to send out to prospective authors. And it has a Google form for people to sign up to write their story. And then artists who wish to contribute visually, artists with a mental experience, they can create art, and that'll be every other page. So I just really am excited to get this completed. So everything you said made me think of all of that. How about that?
And I should say there is a big shift. Like how I discuss teachers, I don't think every teacher teaches that way, but I think it's, that mindset can slip in very easily. And I think that can happen really with anything, right? Like we look at, unfortunately, many of us are kind of subconsciously taught to look at people through their value or their value in a moment. And I think that the danger of that is, and I'm not, I'm mostly correcting myself to make sure I say something I don't want to say, but I think when we look at people only at their temporary value, we forget about their long-term value and the value we might not see in a moment. And I think it's also important to say that, being human is inherently a series of moments, right? Like we get some of our favorite people, other people might not like because they only see them in their rougher moments, or they see them say something they might not hear, that the other people might not hear. And I think it's really interesting, especially because human beings are like inherently bad at perspective. As a species, we are constantly like in such a skewed vantage point at all times. And we forget to apply like empathy through as a lens of perspective or insight into situations we may not know. And so I'm definitely biased about my education, but definitely being an educator as well now. I've been able to see that there are whole swaths of people who are like working to change the system and systems throughout all programs, because we as people have like, especially I feel like in the last like 10 or so years, we've really glommed on to the idea of empathy as a means to empower. And there's also a large chunk of us moving towards more of a strength-based focus. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because I believe strongly that like we cannot thrive as people if we are only looked at in a deficit-based mindset. And additionally, I love the concept of your book. That's going to be so cool. And it's going to be, I think, just an absolute success story.
Thank you so much. I will send that document to you if you'd like. And if you feel so inclined to contribute, you are most welcome.
Thank you. I would love that.
Yay! Hooray! So you spoke a little bit about being on both sides of the fence. I mean, having gone through the education system and your experiences there, and then being on the other side as an educator. Talk about full circle. My next question kind of dovetails into that a little bit, and I'm glad because I really want to hear about this. Today's society judges what it does not understand, of course. And so what do we not understand about these educators who are doing to change and what they face because of, stereotypes about teachers and then these wonderful humans that are trying to change that? What do we not understand?
So I could say so much about this. I think the hardship, and I think it's also important to note that there are in the United States, especially, there is a very strong hostility towards teachers. And I mean, there's a strong hostility towards education and the education system. And I mean, especially as someone who works very closely with families and often works with people who have a really hard school day when it's the programs I run on my own, and then actually working with people who like a lot of neurospicy students, a lot of other students. I think what I'm very blessed to be is I have an organization that really supports me in my educational work. And I think the big thing that we forget about is how hard it is to be a teacher, especially in this modern age. We have, centuries of it being hard to be an educator. And we have, so much time of people being angry and frustrated with the education system. And I think it would be really easy to get mad at this school, to get mad at the teacher, especially the teacher who's really working hard to support students and is met with judgment and being told no, they can't, and has to pay out of pocket to get supplies, and has probably 100 students in a day, depending on how much they do in the school, and runs after school programs, and then realistically does not make money, does not make good money,
Yeah,
may not have a strong support network at home. And I think all of these things make it impossible. Well, not impossibly hard, because there are so many wonderful educators who go out and they
sure.
do the work. But I think the other thing that people don't realize about educators, and we talk about this a lot as a society, but I find often most people just respond with, oh, what are you going to do? Or how do we change it? I don't know.
Mm,
Our educational system is not designed for students. It's inherently not. More and more people are leaving public education because it's fundamentally not designed. But I also would say it's not fundamentally designed to support teachers. And it's
hmm.
not fundamentally designed to endorse the passion of a good teacher, let alone sometimes for a year, let alone decades, right? We watch people burn out. Couple highlights like Ebbett Elementary. I love the fact that Ebbett Elementary, the first episode has teacher burnout. And it's been
Hmm.
a couple months or something for that teacher. And the other
Hmm.
thing I love about Abbott Elementary is it is a brutal look at how hard it is to be an educator. And I love the
Hmm.
fact that they really dive into the teacher-parent relationship. And I think on all sides, when you have a mama bear, papa bear, a teacher who's burnt out, hard days,
Mm.
all of these things, I think it can be really also easy to forget teachers are people.
Hmm.
They may have an impossibly hard day, and they persevere and they work hard and they do everything, and maybe by the time there's a teacher parent conference, they're burnt out beyond compare, and people forget that.
Yeah.
It hurts for me to see that. It hurts for me to now better understand that as an adult and realize, today I was mentioned just before this interview, I've been teaching all day and I'm tired.
Right. Right.
But I think we have to remember that there are people. There are
Mm.
people not always funded well. There are people who are met with, oh, what are you going to do? Or no a lot. There are people trying especially within large classrooms, they may have 30 kids and they've got to balance everything going on with those kids.
Hmm.
And so I would love to live in a world that, especially since there is that old infamous saying of those who can't do teach, which I can't stand that. That mindset is so derogatory and so hostile in general to educators, especially with how it's used. I would love to see more empathy for educators. I would love to see the option for more communication. And I would also love to see educators like words. I would love to see our society shift to like Japan or other countries where educators are like literally, they are held in so high regard and they are trained so well and they are so supported. I'm sure it's also incredibly hard to live up to those expectations and things as well. But I think and to sum all this up one more time, we've got to apply more empathy, more patience with our educators, and we've got to find ways to treat them better in schools and otherwise.
Now, I have so much on all of this, but I will, for the respect of time, keep it concise. So I love that you said Abbott Elementary. I love Abbott Elementary. I was going to say something, but I was like, it's kind of not the time. So I'm so happy that you brought that up. And it's really nice to know that they are very, very true to the experience of the teacher. So that makes me super happy. Countries that pay their teachers way more than they do lawyers and doctors. There are countries that do that because teachers are so integral to the functioning of society. So it really, really would be amazing if that could come this way. Now, I've never done this before, but I will. If you could tell a message to our governments, whether it be state or, just over at the White House, if you could give a message as an educator based on recent experiences and what needs to be done better, what would you tell them? Don't hold back.
Oh my gosh, there's so much that I could say. I'm trying to think of how to say this, and I'm going to try to say this well. It might be a little messy. What I would say, educators do better when we care about them, when we love them, when we acknowledge them, when we treat them right. They have to have more funding. There's so many programs across the United States, even non-educational, that need more funding, need higher quality support, need all of these things. But we also need training to keep up with how to treat kids right, how to stay present in mindfulness. We've got to change the system, in all honesty. I think there are very few people in the United States who actually acknowledge that the US education system works as the best it possibly can. And for the sake of educators, for the sake of kids, for the sake of those kids who want to become educators, we've got to reinvest. We've got to shape our education system. We've got to apply more empathy too. I know, that being said, I do work with the government occasionally. I understand very little of how complex it is. I know, like, one of the running sayings is, don't expect things to move swiftly in government work. Like, never expect it. The other one that I've heard a lot is you may have a great program, you may change the world, but don't expect it to get done. Like, expect no to that program a lot of the time.
Mm.
And I think we've got to reshape that and refocus it, not just on a budgetary means, not just on a future of our nation means, but like on a human mindset. You've got to look at the education as a human need and a sustainable and methodical practice for the future of those who are going to go through education, and also those who want to do the work that needs to be done right for the future of our nation. Because if it's not, the same issues are going to keep up. And they're going to keep happening, and it's just going to get angrier, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to become like a snake eating its tail more than ever.
And that's how we become that film Idiocracy. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. You go to Costco, and the guy's like, "Welcome to Costco. I love you." What state are you in?
I'm in Colorado.
Okay. All right. Colorado. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send this episode to our state reps, yours and mine. So maybe they will take some consideration or even just a moment to understand humanity speaking to them, because, they're very popular for going around and saying, "What do you need? What can I do for you?" Well, here it is. So representatives, that's going to be great. Other thing I want to tell you is more words of affirmation, because that's just me in a nutshell. But for yourself. And I'm also speaking to other educators out there. All of you are just simply amazing. But let me tell you something, because you guys stuck it through and you gave of yourself beyond what you had left in you every day. The students that you give that love and just knowledge, right? And that you instill with these amazing values because you took the time to put these ideas and to put these values into them and these concepts that they could be better and do better and feel safe. Because all of you educators have done so, whether you see it now in the K through 12 period or after, if they come back to see you, just know that your efforts are not unrecognized and they're not unseen. If anything, I would tell you to keep it in your heart on a daily basis that you have had, an imprint, a fingerprint on what will become an amazing human being because of you. So any little action that you've done is worth it. And I can't even thank you enough, because I know that I have so many educators in my life that without them, I wouldn't be where I am. I would never have gone to college. I would have never learned to play the flute. I would never have known that there was more to me and more for me than what I was taught by society. So thank you. Thank you. And thank all teachers. I don't want to cry, but thank you. I really, truly mean it, every word.
Thank you.
And I don't know anyone that would disagree with me. So, except maybe my governor, but whatever. Moving on. So what I would like for you to do, and I'm going to ask this backwards because, again, it's just me. I would like for you to tell us the why behind what you do, and then tell us what you do.
I love that. So the why is to bridge those gaps. The why is to reach out, to tell stories that help people, especially on those days where people are lost or deeply afraid or feel lonely or honestly are on the verge. It's also to help kids not go through what I went through, not establish their own self-hatred at such a young age, which that needs to not happen. Like we need to like teach people and acknowledge that like shame, it may be helpful in small doses, but teaching someone who is like 5 years old to hate themselves, that is not healthy. And the last why is honestly because I love this work. I love to get to go out, play, have fun, do classes, do Dungeons and Dragons, do whatever, and see people react to stories and build their confidence. What I do is all of those things, sometimes for money. I try to make sure I ask for money. It's harder than it should be for me to ask for money. And it's taken me a long time. But it's also what I do is I teach Dungeons and Dragons to build real life skills. I run classes. I do play events. I do run programs that help people establish different programs in their organizations based on creativity and how it can be used to empower individuals. All of it really is at its core establishing establishing educational things, whether that's camps, classes, day programs, whatever, so that people have access to creativity that is purposeful and is mindful. And at the end of the day, I'd love to say that it's not hard and it's always easy. It's not. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of focus. And I am internally blessed that I get to have those whys and I get to do that work.
It's beautiful work, for sure. Where can people find you and your work?
So I will make sure all my links are provided as well, because I learned the hard way that some of my stuff is hard to find. My email, people are always welcome to email me. Again, like I said, this is part of the reason why I make sure links are provided, because my goodness, does my email. I was gifted my email, but I love it, so I keep it, which is ndeg@gmail. And if you're like me and went, oh my gosh, in the back of your mind, that is so many similar sounding letters. It is. Don't worry about that. You were right. A little bit of a behind the veil. That is supposed to be neurodiverse tabletop role playing game. That's why those letters are there. And my goodness, would that be the longest email ever if I kept that. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I am Thomas Rhodey Wilson. I didn't get to go into the history of Rhodey, but that name has been with me for a very long time. It's like a special pseudonym. Additionally, you can find my LinkedIn. All my past podcasts and things will be there. And I will also highlight, again, learning the hard way with some of these website names. My website is R&H Creative Advocacy and Storytelling.net. Did not realize how long that was going to be when I created that. That was very much, my first website kind of thing. And additionally, with that, you can also find me doing community events, both online and in person throughout the community. I'm very blessed that it's starting to expand. Yeah, well, there are people starting to ask for things in other countries, which is incredibly exciting.
Nice. Yeah.
So that is where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, we're going to find you, totally are going to find you. And yes, we will put those links in the description of the episode. And shout out to Podmatch for matching us, because how else would we have been here right now? Two amazing people brought together by Podmatch, and you can be too. As a host or a guest, if you're looking for guests that are amazing, or if you're a guest looking to promote yourself, your book, your work, promote whatever you need to, you can do that via Podmatch for next to nothing. A few dollars, I think it's like $6 or something like that. But the link will be in the description as well for you to start your Podmatch journey. And I would recommend it. I'm sure Thomas recommends it too, but it's a wonderful platform. Alex and Alicia Sanfilippo, thank you guys so much for creating Podmatch. It's amazing. One thing I have to tell you, Thomas, and you may view me differently after this, I hope not, but for the longest time, okay. I always had a thing against D&D, but not like for the reason you think. So it's a previous experience with someone who was like very invested in it. And so I was kind of like invisible, you know what I mean? And so for me, it kind of had like a personal thing. So when I see it, I kind of like cringe a little bit. But then when I read what you're doing with it, that kind of changed things for me, because the way that you utilize that with kids and with events is so meaningful. I'm willing to give it another shot.
First of all, I don't blame you. I have heard horror stories with people's experience with D&D. I've also heard that before. There is a very famous individual that I am not going to name who is a big D&D fan, and I have heard it has deeply impacted that person's work in the past. I'm not going to say. Those D&D nerds might know who I'm talking about. I don't know if those stories are true, but if it impacts someone that famous, I'm sure it can impact one of us little people out here in the world.
Yeah. It's got to be John Cena. No, I'm kidding. But please, D&D people, don't come after me, because like I just thought about it and I'm like, oh my God, there's going to be pitchforks and books and dice thrown at my house. I'm scared. But yes, thank you so much for entertaining that. And I had another thought. We didn't really get to go much into the storytelling, but I think everyone can understand like where that plays into the D&D and the events. And again, that's so amazing. And we'll be able to share your links so that way they can find that. I would love to ask you our final question for you, and then I'll go after you. If you could share a message with humanity, any message at all, what would you tell them?
So many I could say. I was actually thinking about this particular one earlier today. And so a little bit of my own nerddom. I absolutely love the show Ted Lasso. I had somebody recommend it because they said I would meld with the message and things. And I think about this a lot, and it's kind of a two-prong. I love in that show the sign that they have that I think it says don't stop believing, or belief or something. And I think that's huge. I think like our commitment to believing in the goodness in people and the kindness of just carrying out kindness. Like every day we can do little acts of kindness, and that doesn't necessarily change the world. It's not going to solve every problem. But there's something really beautiful about going out and just doing an act of kindness, even against the darkness and the anger and the hostility in the world. But the other thing I want to add to that is be kinder to yourself. Like we all have so much judgment and hostility and anger tossed at us, realistically, for just talking. It can happen online, it can happen in person. And I think the thing that makes us so angry nowadays is very much an internal thing. We're unhappy with something about ourselves, so we're unhappy with the world. And I think if we can start by first showing kindness to the world in general and like stepping back and holding on to that anger and then starting to forgive ourselves, starting to accept ourselves more, starting to acknowledge our strengths instead of our deficits, starting to understand where we need to grow, that's how we get rid of that anger. And I know anger feels good. It can make us feel good, but it's never as powerful as kindness. Anger is quick. It is false. It is not evil, but it is very rarely used well. So please be kinder with the world, be kinder with ourselves, and understand the power of kindness.
That is an excellent message. Jizz, multi-message. I love it so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. Just, before I go into this final thought, thank you so much for being here. I hope that you had a great time and that you feel like you've really been able to share with humanity. So thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you for having me on. It's been a truly joyful talk.
It really has. I mean, I was not quite awake, but I'm like wide awake. So final thought, I have been trying something new. I remember watching so much television as a kid, and you have Maury and Jerry Springer, they have that final thought. So my final thought for Humanity 2.0 is this: storytelling is part of our lives. It's part of our culture. It's who we are. And it's almost as though we are just as much of our stories as our stories are of us. And so I find that it's just natural that our stories, they inspire us to produce these massive, beautiful forms of art, whether it be paintings, whether it be dancing, whether it be film. Film is huge. That's visual art in motion. There's so many, the written word, right? So many different versions of art and expression that come through and are based on storytelling. So be sure to continue to tell your story and the story of others. If you hear amazing stories, then tell that story in whatever form or fashion is easiest for you, or maybe you learn how to tell those stories in whatever medium that you can. But the point is to continue the story and remind people, like Thomas said, about being kind to one another and being kind to yourself. That was an excellent point. I'm stealing it right now, but it's so true. If we could be kinder to ourselves, if we could be kinder to others. In fact, there's an organization I just found out about today who is trying to do 1 million acts of kindness, and they're at about 700,000. So we'll put the link in the description, and then I can find the card and send it to you, Thomas. I think it's so freaking cool. And so I remember in college having like this group called Random Acts of Kindness. And now there's all kinds of kindness groups. So there are people out there that are trying to do kind things. There are people out there that are hosting shows about humanity to help inspire humanity to bring forth that 2.0. There's people that are storytelling and working with kids to help them heal and to bring communities together, Thomas. And so there is much to be had in terms of the conversation for humanity and also the potential that we have and what we could be. And I challenge everyone to just, take out the what we could be, what we will be. And earlier you mentioned the word no and how things cannot happen right away or the change that you want, it's a no. I have a problem with the word no. I don't like it. And I think that if we kind of operate at I'll do it anyway, or I'll do it myself, or watch this, I'll just watch, I think that we will get a whole lot of work done. And I am very hopeful for our future, and I'm very hopeful for the students that come across your path and the children that you interact with. So again, Thomas, thanks for being here on Humanity 2.0 podcast. And for the rest of you guys, we will see you next week on Humanity 2.0, where we are interviewing more humans about humanity. Can't get enough. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the show, as well as check out Thomas's links and follow him and join his community, and also Podmatch. Thanks so much, guys, and don't forget to be good to other humans. Take care, and we'll see you next week. Humanity 2.0 podcast is brought to you by Vanessa The Vivacious Productions. Want to be a guest? Visit the link in the episode description for future guest opportunities. Ready to podcast like a boss? Join Podmatch and begin your Podmatch journey via the link also listed in the description. Subscribe to Humanity 2.0 podcast on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and more. Follow and help support the show by buying humanity a cup of coffee via buymeacupofcoffee.com/humanity 2.0 podcast. Above all, don't forget to be good to other humans. See you guys next time.